Today is February 20th. Welcome to Native Calgarian. Oki, Naganago, Mekoche, Chestakom Aki. My name is Red Thunder Woman. My married English name is Michelle Robinson, and I use she and her pronouns. Native Calgarian is being recorded on the lands of the Niitsitapi, which is the Blackfoot Confederacy. The Blackfoot south in the opposed US-Canadian border are the Blackfeet. North of the border are the Siksika, Ganai, and Bagani of the Confederacy. These lands are Treaty 7, signed September 22nd, 1877, with signatures that include the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Wesley, Chiniki, Bears Pond Nations of the Stoney, and the Dene from Tsuut'ina. I acknowledge all First Nation, Métis, Inuit, status and non-status across Turtle Island as the keepers of these lands. All non-Indigenous are treaty partners with the government signing on your behalf. I honor the Blackfoot as the elders and members have been so kind to me on my Red Road journey. Elder Red Crane taught me how to pronounce my spirit name. I was born in Calgary, or in Blackfoot, Mokinstis, as Michelle Elliott, an English name which has afforded me privilege in an English colonial world. My mother is Northern Slavey Dene, or Satu Dene, but my Indian Act and Post status card by the Canadian government says Yellowknives Dene. My father is so Canadian. I am a daughter of the Mayflower and a daughter of the American Revolution while having an Indian Act and Post status card. My Dene lineage roots me in the land of the Hare people, also known as the Great Bear Lake people in Treaty 11. I'm a native to Turtle Island, and my Dene nation is a visitor to this area, Fincho Tine Indahe in Satu Dene, meaning many horse town, named after the Calgary Stampede. Land acknowledgements are critical for creating a safer space for Indigenous, as well as honoring the host as the guest, and honoring your role as a treaty partner. My humblest apologies to the Blackfoot elders and language keepers as I learn proper pronunciation. Any mistakes or misinterpretations will be on me. I encourage questions so that misunderstandings can be cleared up as soon as possible. I do not speak on behalf of all Indigenous. I just share what I know as I walk down my red road. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for already showing your support. If you value listening or watching and can afford to give, thank you. To those who cannot afford to give, love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or your questions. Also, giving a positive review helps in whatever medium you're listening from. I have a YouTube channel where you can go and subscribe. Go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcast and pin posts on social media. So this particular one, I wanted to share last week's book club on the act of genocide that was talking about the sterilization of Indigenous women here in Canada. And but you know, this one's a little more historic in the sense that a lot has happened. So for anyone living under a rock, there's been honking convoys that made it to Ottawa for the last 3 weeks. Last podcast, I spoke with Devin from Lethbridge, and we talked a little bit about the Coutts issue. So the federal government, the provincial governments, and the cities, all these different orders of government have different ideologies, and a lot of them just play finger pointing politics rather than showing any leadership. And so the borders in Coutts, Alberta, Manitoba, and Windsor ended up being locked up, and we were losing billions of dollars in trade. And that's kind of a neoliberal conversation to have about capitalism in general. I think, you know, if you have listened to this podcast in the past, you know, this system was imposed. This system doesn't work for anyone, but this is the system that's existing. And by their own standards, the colonial standards, if the only thing that matters to them is making money, then this particular convoy should have been ended a long time ago, but it wasn't. So in 1988, the then Brian Mulroney drafted up the Emergency Act because the War Measures Act that Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, had invoked, for some people that sparked a lot of outrage. So the idea was to have this Emergency Act in lieu of the War Measures Act, and the War Measures Act then became defunct. So we've had this Emergency Act as part in the books since 1988. I think a lot of us would argue that there were many steps that, well, if you talk to the mainstream media and the police, oh my goodness, they were trying so hard to, peacefully dismantle this for the last 3 weeks. But the truth is that the mainstream media and the RCMP are, of course, in favor of the convoys because they are always on the side of white supremacy and upholding white supremacy. So they really did nothing, and there wasn't anything really forcing them to do it. And the truth is, government's not supposed to get involved, but very clearly, the police nationally were in solidarity, in arms with this ridiculous, ridiculous convoy. A lot of progressives on Twitter were calling it the Karen convoy. I kept calling it the FluTruxKlan, or the FluTruxKlan, because I thought that was funny. Somebody said it, and I thought, yep, that's what it is. So there was a lot of hypocrisy, especially by conservatives. It came out yesterday that Jason Kenney had actually sent a letter to the federal government saying, oh, we need some federal assistance with shutting down this convoy in Coutts, Alberta, which conveniently is interesting now that he has a lawsuit against the actions they took. But I'm in Calgary, Alberta, and for folks who are from here, like all you get is conservative media. All you get are conservative talking points. Central Alberta, all of that. It's not going to be honest. And Fox News and Rebel Media are regulars out here. Like they think that's news. So they don't see the hypocrisy of Doug Ford and Jason Kenney because they are willfully ignorant and blind to it. There's this really strong Christian agenda, and Jason Kenney is a strong Catholic. So anyway, it came out the amount of money that was going into this. It was $10 million the last I checked before GoFundMe shut it down. And they broke down where the money was coming from, and it almost all came from Calgary, Alberta, and then and the U.S. as well. Lots of money from the U.S. So Fox News has gotten involved, and it's just blown into this false narrative by conservative media that there's a whole bunch of freedoms being stolen in Canada, which is not even ridiculously close to the truth. We had Paul Brandt, a country singer who I had respect for prior to this convoy. He wasn't great at understanding racism, but he was just kind of a good guy trying to do good things. And so for those who don't live here, unfortunately you have to try to work with fellows like that. And I tried, and for the topic of missing and murdered Indigenous women, but unfortunately, like I just can't possibly support his organizations not in the city or whichever. And I was really happy to see. So for folks who don't know, Paul Brandt was a registered nurse, and he used to work at Children's Hospital. And there was a doctor that had tweeted, I'm glad we are no longer colleagues. And I was sad to see that, but I felt a little more justified in how I feel about Paul Brandt now. So it's just depressing. Anyway, I don't know if I actually said it. So since I've had COVID, I don't remember a lot of things. But anyway, he did rent a chopper, or has a chopper, I don't know, and took a whole bunch of food down to the convoy. So at one point in time, people were tweeting out, "Oh my God, they're so starving, they're dying." So Paul Brandt had taken a helicopter and gave them supplies. And like we have major celebrities out here, Theron Fleury, Brett Wilson, that are supporting the convoy. We had conservative MLAs and MPs go down to these border crossing, or I guess border blockades, and the convoys, and take their selfies and say how much they hate Trudeau. And even the New York Times have been misreporting it. And progressive Twitter just went after them and said, you are lying about this reality. And now they don't have any faith in what they're reporting on the Ukraine or anything else, which I think is actually a good thing. But some claim that they had canceled their subscriptions to the New York Times, and I hope that's true, because we should not be giving money to an American media source. Progressives drive me mental. Anyway, um, Jordan Clipper from The Daily Show came up, and it is a sad day when Trevor Noah and Jordan Clipper are the only true sources of media coming out of here. Even the state-funded CBC kept bringing former police chiefs up to talk about this reality, which 100% shows that they didn't understand at all why police are problematic in the last, since forever, but specifically the last 2 years that we've been talking about how problematic police are. Not getting it. So, progressive news sources are just out to lunch on this as well. But that said, a lot of the news agencies were being attacked. They were being attacked at the Coutts border. They were being attacked at, the border blockades, the convoy blockades. They were being attacked. And it was funny because Brandy Morin, who is an Indigenous reporter, and she's been attacked relentlessly for giving Indigenous perspective. She was like, "Oh, that's real nice that you guys starting to understand what some of us are going through." But they don't, and now they're actually getting a small taste of what it's like to not be liked. And anyway, so there's lots of videos of how incredibly abusive, violent these folks, these convoy supporters are. It's just disgusting. Lots of fake news coming out about some woman being trampled by police. Even the Fox News reported that they had died, and they didn't. So it's just ridiculousness. Like these folks have been using children and folks with disabilities as shields. At one point in time, they even made snow forts to try to block the police. I swear to God, I don't know how half of these folks have even gotten up in the morning and been able to function in this society. It's absolutely awful. But the worst part is people believe it. I had put out a tweet thread talking about it because a lot of progressives, allies, are like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that this is happening. If you're not from Ottawa, you don't know how awful it's been. Oh my God, this last 3 weeks is awful." And I'm just laughing because welcome to my fucking life. These assholes, they're racist, misogynistic, violent pricks that always have the law on their side. That's who I live with every day. That's why our people are dying. And I can't seem to get folks to understand this. And so now that they've had a small taste in the last 3 weeks of what it's like to be a frickin' BIPOC in Alberta, and they won't get that. Like, they don't put that together. They're just like, "Oh my God, I was so oppressed. I couldn't go to the store. Oh my God, it was so awful." So, like, you have the Karen convoy going to Ottawa to deal with the Karens of the country. Like, it was just a nightmare watching it. But of course, like an idiot, I'm glued to my social media. So anyway, the effects of this, like I've been getting ridiculous private messages from trolls, from jerks, people telling me that, "Oh, no, you just don't understand and haven't done your research. Here's a video for you from the rebel media that will help you understand." It's like, no, that's not going to help me understand because, I understand enough about science to understand how vaccines work and the mandate to, um, well, we don't even have real mandates. Like, for folks who don't know, like a lot of the conservative politicians have just succumbed to what they want and are pulling all of the mandates. So here in Alberta, the kids, they don't have to wear a mask. I'm really proud of one little nephew here in the Northeast who worked really hard at doing a school walkout and, in support of mask mandates, because the schools here have never been given proper tools to really, combat this. They've done a pretty good job, all things considering. But like, I got COVID in January, and a lot of folks did, and the daycare is the same thing. Lots of problems with COVID. So, that they're struggling, and the Omicron variant, of course, we didn't have a vaccine for. So the morons who are against all of this are like, oh, see, they don't work. And it's like, no, they don't work because it's a variant. And if you understood like grade 3 science, then you would understand that, you just can't make a variant like that. But also, there's a way bigger picture here that I'm not talking about. And that's that because we as Western world hogged all of the vaccines and didn't give them anywhere, of course there's going to be variants. So like I've had 3 thanks to the advocacy of the Indigenous doctors and liberal government who was willing to listen to it. And as a result, I've been lucky to get them. But, I can't change this system. And if I could, in a perfect world, nobody would get a second vaccine until everyone had their first vaccine. And when I say everyone, I mean the whole fucking planet, not, the Western world. Anyway, for folks who don't know, Alberta has one of the lowest vaccine populations compared to a lot of the other country, but specifically the 5 to 12, which was really important when taking off a mask mandate. For folks who might be hearing this, there's a dog right beside me, and her name is Rexy, and she's just the sweetest German Shepherd, and she doesn't know why I'm not giving her 100% of all of my attention. So anyway, 5 to 12-year-olds don't have their proper vaccines. Stupid conservative government's already like, oh my God, we're going to take down the masks. And thankfully, a lot of kids are still wearing them. But at the end of the day, it's just shitty government decisions that are causing this stupid pandemic to continue. And ironically, the very people who claim they want their freedoms aren't helping with it at all. Some positive news I read on Twitter of the 4 main flu variants. I guess one may be completely eliminated because for the last 2 years, a lot of us were actually quite consistent with masks, social distancing, and let's hope that's true, that we've lost one of our vaccine viruses as a result. But I know this is probably like nothing compared to a lot of people. But I think it's really important that we talk about this narrative that the convoy has. A lot of people think that I don't understand, which I think is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. So if you've missed my prior podcasts, when the pandemic started, I talked about Indigenous hesitation on vaccines and why that's important to recognize and honor. And because we don't have culturally sensitive mental health supports in Alberta, and we don't have any mental health supports really. A lot of Indigenous folks don't have their trauma really properly addressed. And as a result, of course, they're open to like the most extreme conspiracies when it comes to government, because government has done absolutely nothing to bridge the repair that needs to be done. And I would like to think, as a liberal who is part of the Indigenous Peoples Commission, that this government has done so much more than we've ever seen in the history. Sadly, the bar is so low, this much looks amazing. So they recognize on a regular basis they have a lot more work to do, and I'm grateful for that. I'd like to see more quicker, and but at the end of the day, I'm living in a really good time where I had access to vaccines. Anyway, I wanted to talk about their narrative, the convoy's narrative of forced vaccines. We have no forced vaccines. In that Twitter thread, I put out, when I applied for a job that I really wanted, they said, at that time, and this would have been late November, early December. No, it would have been late November because I started at the beginning of December. They wanted the QR code, proof of your vaccine. So I sent it because I have no problem with that. And I didn't get that job, but that's okay. The bigger picture was that was the only time I ever seen somebody ask for it. My husband got a job and he wasn't asked for his vaccine status. And when I did work at that job, which I've recently quit, I wasn't asked for my vaccine status at all. so that there was no forced vaccines in order to get jobs here in Calgary. So I don't understand this narrative of being forced to vaccinate. Yeah, I do have a lot of sympathy and understanding that it sucks that you have to, make sure you have your ID, your QR code, going into restaurants, which no longer matters actually here in Alberta, because again, Jason Kenney's succumbed to their demands, and as a result, we don't have to show that anymore. So I don't know what to say to folks. It's ridiculous. I shared this one country that had dropped their vaccine mandates or their masking mandates, and they are at the maximum they can handle in their hospitals now. So, like, it's not following science in any capacity what the conservative government is doing. So, but ironically, because we're in Alberta and everybody believes in a Christian God to save them, like that's the insidiousness of their belief system, is that their Christianity, it prioritizes the expense and the well-being of the community. And it's a really gross way to look at it, but that's the way a lot of these convoy folks feel. And in fact, yesterday was one of their first court appearances, and they actually brought up they're doing God's will as a legal defense. So that, like, I tell people how Christian, white, cis it is here, but I don't think people get it. And like I know they won't learn from the last 3 weeks, but it's been on full display now for the rest of the country for those who are willing to look. So we don't have forced vaccines. Yeah, it sucks you can't go to the gym. And I know a lot of businesses are hurting from this, but a lot of businesses are also profiting from this. And that's the shitty thing about capitalism in general. That bigger picture, like we've had pandemic funding going into all aspects of government since polio. And ironically, I think they had an awful, like at all three levels of, or three orders of government, they had an awful way of handling it, but it doesn't matter now. We're in this, we're doing it this way. And the selfishness of a bunch of bully Albertans is going to change how people are looking at all of this. I've blocked so many people. I get messages from trolls and jerks. For folks who don't know, a lot of us who are BIPOC get cops who pretend to be some fake account, and they're like, "Hi, how are you? Hi, beautiful." So we all know just to block them, but it's so ridiculous how folks operate on all of this. So anyway, back to the convoy talking points. Again, for folks who don't know, there's a book called The Tower of Babel, and it's from a CBC executive that talked about how much, well, it talked about the CBC in general, but the one thing I took from the book was how Canadians get their media from an outside country, and that's unheard of. Like in Belgium, they have Belgium TV. In Britain, they watch British TV. In France, they watch French TV. But in Canada, we watch American TV. So our people who watch a lot of TV and don't read know a lot more about American law and justice as opposed to Canadian. So these guys made their court appearances, and they talked about their Miranda rights and their First Amendment rights not being violated. And I know people don't like educated people on this stuff, but like they were being mocked in the court system. And on Twitter today, I mean, there are teachers out there talking about how we have to teach our children Canadian. And legal system. I don't like to use the term justice system because it ain't a justice system. It's a justice system for white people, not necessarily anybody else. So anyway, they sound so ignorant in every aspect of their argument when it comes to these so-called forced vaccines and such. But at the end of the day, it's all rooted in white supremacy and racism. And I have folks sending me videos. You don't have to send me the video that tries to debunk the racism. You're not debunking it. So again, for the Easterners who won't take the time to listen to a Western Indigenous voice to save their fucking life, out here we've had these yellow vesters and folks who have been calling Justin Trudeau Hitler, and that the state is overtaking and the new world order is overtaking an agenda, blah blah blah. I hate giving it any space at all. So all this referencing of white supremacy is coming out in droves. Again, we had yellow vesters who have been doing this march forever. Long ago, they were doing it, and they just evolved into these anti-mandate people and have brought in all of the white hippies that never see racism, but are absolutely perpetuating it coming together. So anyway, we've had, swastikas, white pride stickers going all around the city. Yesterday they had another march, so there was even more that a bunch of people were trying to take off. I threw up that picture of squaw that I seen that has not been taken down. I have to report it to the anti-hate group and another group that tracks hate before um, I guess I'm gonna have to go deal with it because nobody else will. Anyway, this is our reality. It's always been here. So for folks who are so ignorant to that, like it's just a shame. They talk about health freedom. I mean, they weren't talking about health freedom when we were looking for midwifery to be funded, and that's like their pro-life agenda, their pro-Christian agenda. So it doesn't even make sense. How they feel about these the convoy folks, how they feel about everything. It's just coming down to hate. It's hate against Trudeau. When people are saying Trudeau, well, that's gendered violence. Like, you're using gendered sexual violence. And people are so daft, they don't know that, they don't see it. And then when they align themselves with white supremacists, have Nazi symbols, use Hitler references to Justin Trudeau, like that's that racism and that hate, that anti-Semitism. And for folks who are Jewish, I mean, this is awful because, the actual Holocaust and Hitler literally targeted people who were not normal, not white, straight, cis. These were the folks that they were targeting. So none of what they're saying makes sense. And then in Coutts, there was 4 charges about conspiracy to kill RCMP. I have never, as much as I'm so pissed off at the legal system. So folks that are actually Jewish are watching all of this anti-Semitic, racist crap being put out there, while these so-called convoy supporters have never supported in any capacity fighting this racism, this misogyny, this sexual violence that is becoming the norm. And they never had. This is literally why we had the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit inquiry with 231 calls to justice that have never been implemented because they don't want to solve this. And I try to tell people this, but they don't listen. They don't care. So it's really hurtful to see people be on the side of this. I actually changed my profile pic to say, there's no 2 sides of this, because you're either for human rights or you're not. And the ableism that we are seeing on full display, if you have an autoimmune disorder or something, then you shouldn't even be out in public. Like, that is actual fascism. Siding on the cops' side is fascism. And this is the other thing, so apparently some cop somewhere is on leave because of not getting the vaccines. So he's been giving information to the convoy about what the next police operations are going to be. And we haven't had a charge for treason yet. actual plots to kill the RCMP, plots to kill Justin Trudeau. This one guy, this was a long time ago, long before, and this was the Yellow Vest movement, and he went to the stupid PM's residence, which is not his actual residence because it's under construction. And he had guns and he was going to go talk to Trudeau. And unbelievably, the media said, oh, he's just a friendly sausage maker because he's white. So this is what we're dealing with. And everybody's so blind to it. One of our leading Black activists in the city, Adora, went to the Sentry Box, one of my favorite places because my family loves Dungeons and Dragons. My dad loves war shit, and that they have all the books and such up in the top part of it. Love this place. Some assholes wearing a Confederate flag mask, not even properly, under his nose like an idiot. And, it's just normal. So, of course, she was triggered and she tweeted about it. But you don't think for a second anybody's going to fucking care in Calgary, Alberta. No, that's white. No, we have these progressives and we have these allies that never showed up to my frickin' campaigns. So anyway, I'm just gonna, systemic change is what we need. And very clearly in Alberta, if it's not forced by the federal government in some capacity, it'll never happen. And regardless, these convoy fuckers actually think they made progress. And sadly, they did, because a lot of the conservative-run provinces are doing exactly what they want them to do. So it's sad, it's pathetic. We're going to obviously see people with some severe issues with COVID at the end of it because we're not following science, because readings for liberals, apparently. So pathetic. So I have nothing but sadness to report on that. Wishing that more Canadians would do something about the racism, misogyny, ableism, because not just long COVID issue problems, but also folks with autoimmune disorders and folks like me who just, I'm not going to work in an environment that I know I'm going to catch COVID because I have health issues. Now, our Alberta government will never recognize my health issues as legitimate because, she can work. People who have legitimate health issues are denied AISH all the time here. It's awful. Living here is hell. Been talking about that forever. Been trying to give solutions, talk to politicians about it, just for it to go in one ear and out the other. The so-called most progressive politicians are like, fucking build that pipe. I hate Indigenous sovereignty. I hate Indigenous sovereignty. And now, like the truckers, they're listed in the MMIW inquiry as part of the problem. There's the police, huge part of the problem, white supremacy. But again, one ear out the other because it doesn't directly affect them. So not a lot of positive things to say about that. And, and right now the progressives are working on supporting teachers, doctors, nurses. And again, these are all people, institutions so filled with racism that they'll never help us in any capacity. Racism is a public health issue. You never hear that coming from doctors and nurses that are white. You certainly don't see them addressing it. Ironically, the fallout from this convoy has been the Black police chief in Ottawa forced to resign. I find that hysterical. I guess he was doing really good work in anti-racism. So I'm sure that's why the cops hated him so much. And I'm sure that's why they were quick to leak that information. And I'm sure that's why we will never find any evidence to prove that leaked information came from a certain cop. So pathetic. And this is like, white people are happy that we're seeing police violence now against some of these convoy folks. And it's pathetic. It's so pathetic. They don't see their own hand in the pain and suffering. Okay, I feel like I'm rambling here. I am. I'm sorry. let's go back to something really positive that did happen. There was a small group of Ottawa community that went out and blocked the trucks. They did more community policing in a short few hours than the Ottawa police did in 3 weeks. And like I talk about community policing on a regular. That's what their clans are. And Taylor McNally's been talking about that of Inclusive Canada. Please be following her. She's doing good work on anti-racism work, one of our lead Black activists in the city. You know, these are the folks doing the work, calling it out, calling out the racism, the white supremacy. Anyway, she's a regular volunteer with the Bear Clan, and she's been talking about a lot of the issues she sees where she lives in the East Village, and she's been public about that. I'm not outing where she lives. The police have been monitoring, watching her because they know where she lives, and it's awful. But again, Canadians are like, oh, that's okay. She's just a Black woman, so I guess it makes it okay, and it doesn't. But it, you know, welcome to my life of where that's okay with them. So anyway, I'm definitely sad about everything that's been happening. One thing that's been funny is, you know, watching on Twitter, people kind of mocking some of these ridiculous talking points that this convoy folks have been bringing up. And you know, I've been trying to retweet them and share them, although I think some folks just don't get humor. Anyway, something else that's been really sad to me, the Olympics are just wrapped up. And I tried to watch some of it. Actually found it really hard to watch. There was a stupid commercial of, you know, Olympia in Athens in whatever BC, and they kept talking about Canada, and I'm like, ugh, with white people. It was such a, you know, I see anti-Indigenous bias in everything, but I don't think Canadians would have seen it. And I'd hear the anthem, and I just don't feel that pride. I was really happy for the Canadian women's hockey team, but I can't get behind it. And I'm really sad. And I think it's you know, this year of gaslighting from Canadians, from the media, you know, the lack of addressing racism. And it's been really hard to have any pride at all. And I don't want to take away. In fact, I want to congratulate the Indigenous women that played on that team. You know, they worked really hard for this, and to get a gold medal is it's just amazing. So I'm really happy for them. But I just can't get behind the flag waving. I can't get behind it anymore. Um, I'm tired of seeing even a friend of mine who's a, you know, immigrant. She was in the Calgary Herald putting out information about how immigrants love Canada and how it hurts them to see the Canadian flag upside down or the convoy misusing the Canadian flag. And meanwhile, I'm just thinking, yeah, because, you know, the thousands of dead Indigenous children, yeah, that's a lot of community pride. But I know I'll never seem to get through that wall when it comes to some of my friends, some of my family, and it hurts so bad. Um, so why all of this false racist disguised patriotism matters is because despite QT BIPOC across this country telling Canadians how racist it is, well, forever, even especially after the Black Lives Matter protests the last 2 years and the unmarked graves gaslighting media spotlight, you know, an underserved Black man was shot 3 times in the chest and killed in Forest Lawn yesterday. With the non-BIPOC community feeling bad for the police dog that got stabbed, reportedly. I don't know his name, but I'm pretty sad about it. I've tried to work with District 4, which is the police for this area, but they still killed Robin Fiddler after that, Sonny Crazy Bull, and we still have unsolved cases like Colton Crocium, literally in the community, he died. You know, I ran with solutions, I tried, but I'm blocked by my own city councilor. You know, a group of Black women and their allies for a week called for the firing of city cop Alex Dung. He brutally attacked a Black woman, Dahlia Dahlia Kafi. And shortly after a slap on the wrist sentence he got, she succumbed to her struggles with the head trauma she received by Alex Stone, and she's no longer with us. You know, the Black women protesting were attacked by a cop outside the courthouse. And of course, in true white supremacist fashion, they are getting charged with attacking the cop. You know, the system is designed to hurt and kill QT BIPOC. And we talk about genocide all the time on this podcast, but people don't see it. So all of these feelings are stirred up by this shooting. And of course, I just had 3 weeks of proof of it that surprisingly white supremacy Canada can't see. And I hate it, but they all continue to benefit from this system at the cost of our lives. The solutions are there. We have 94 calls to action, 231 calls to justice. This is not including the work of 1996 of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the multiple police reports that are out there. Canada doesn't want to elect people to do that. They want to hate the government. I can't emphasize how different our worlds are experiencing this pandemic. You know, we are being denied services left, right, and center while white Canada gets them. And when I turn on my social media, I see how many people of ours are suffering from deaths. I sat at a sacred fire for the day because a 11-year-old accidentally passed, and we are already under-resourced. I wish Canadians understood how their existence is hurting Indigenous people, the way the systems are designed. You have the power to do the work, and that's why I'm grateful for the Reconciliation Action Group trying to dismantle these systems in some capacity. But every Canadian, I can't emphasize this enough. You addressing your own racism, your anti-Indigenous bias, isn't even all of the work. Dismantling the systems that cause it, that's the work. And I still have to block people because of their white settler fragility. And it's pathetic. It's on purpose. Anyway, I have 2 main GoFundMes that I've been sharing regularly. One is for an anonymous non-white friend with severe mental health struggles. And another one is a Two-Spirit houseless friend and her dog. Been talking about that, sharing that one quite a bit. I'm just going to put the links in this one in the hopes that somebody somewhere will give them some money as they try to go through this. My friend with mental health struggles. I mean, we don't have mental health support networks in Alberta. Definitely not if you're not white, and they're struggling. He tried to move to do some schooling. Anyway, they need coverage, and they're not getting it. And that's just the experience for folks with mental health issues here. And just is the way it is. We don't even recognize head trauma as a severe issue, despite how important I think collectively we all agree our brains are. And yet here are people with brains that are still part of a convoy. Like, I can't understand this world. Another thing I want to talk about is so dismantling the systems, obviously the most important thing. Something that's happening provincially right now are nominations for the NDP. And this is important because as an Alberta Liberal, it pains me to say this. As an Alberta Liberal, I struggle with this. But I also know all the parties are exactly the same. And white people claim that they want to be allies and claim they want reconciliation. And if that is true, then I want you to support Marilyn Northpagan. She's running in Calgary-Klein for the NDP. And, you know, if you believe my words and other QT BIPOC, endorse her, fundraise, donate for her, volunteer for her by getting your friends in that constituency to take out memberships and vote for her. So the important dates to remember is March 3rd is the candidate forum. March 12th is the NDP membership deadline. So if you're not a member by March 12th, then you can't vote in that. And then March 26th is the actual NDP nomination vote. I actually have a friend who's recently moved to our riding. She's been working here for decades. She's considering running, and of course, folks like myself would have to take out an NDP membership. But again, I'm a federal liberal. I'm proud to be. I would stand by Justin Trudeau, what he's done compared to any of the other parties' ridiculous platforms in the last election and prior ones. I wish there was more. Whatever. I'm getting off track. If I'm a federal liberal, I can't take out an NDP membership without going against both of our constitutions. That's colonial politics. That's the division they like to set up and do it so well. So, like, it pains me because that's why I ran for the Alberta Liberals. That, and I don't think the NDP are doing a great job. They just do a really great job for white people, and progressives just eat that up and think it's fabulous. So anyway, Marilyn chose the NDP. We've had Ruth Skelplock. She ran for the NDP, who I love and admire too. And the best way you can support her in the colonial system that colonials claim they want to change is to take out that membership deadline, is to endorse her, fundraise for her, donate to her, volunteer for her, and of course, vote for her. So please, March 3rd, candidate forum, March 12th, membership deadline, March 26th is the actual vote. Important dates. Please talk to your friends in that constituency and see if you can get her to be the candidate for that area. Another important event that is happening is on Wednesday, February 23rd. There's a harm reduction event that's happening in Calgary, Lethbridge, and Edmonton. Edmonton and Calgary at 12 p.m. City Hall for Calgary, the Ledge for Edmonton, and then in Lethbridge, the Galt Gardens at 7 p.m. And it's basically a rally for supporting harm reduction. And I've been lucky enough to be asked to MC the Calgary event. So of course I will. But anyway, Queen tested positive for COVID-19. So they're gonna have a shotgun low-key coronation for the future king, formerly known as Prince Charles. And I wanted to give a shout out to the last comic standing on Prime. It's deadly funny. Only Tom Green can make delicious cheese sandwiches ridiculous. There's this wonderful comic named May, and she's supporting Indian residential school survivors. I think she's getting kicked off next show because she can't hold it on, and Tom Green has just focused right in on her, like she's next. But I mean, all of the comics on there are freaking geniuses. I don't know how I could be in the room. Like when you think of Andrew Fung, who's straight out of Rundle here in Calgary's Northeast, like all you can picture is his wonderful smile. He's so charming, so funny from Kim's Convenience. He's there. Colin Murkety from Whose Line Is It Anyway? Like, this is the guy who can do Stoneface. Tom Green, Stoneface. David Foley, oh my God, so funny. But like, even me, I laugh at my own jokes all the time, and they're not even funny, but they laugh at their jokes all the time, and they can't in this show. So it's so hard because I try not to laugh too, but we can because we're at home watching it, and it's so hard. So I feel so bad for those comics right now. Oh my goodness! And my daughter, the host, is the voice from Toothless of the dragon show. I can't remember the name of it. Oh my God, so funny. So we're enjoying it immensely. I hope you all do too, as kind of a break from all this doom scrolling on social media and watching this ridiculous list. Like, this is treason, and people are downplaying it, and that's heartbreaking. It is and it isn't. Like, so as Indigenous people, you know, we've lived here for thousands of years. So when this system goes, like, whatever, just be another system that comes in. So, you know, like, it's that constantly trying to survive within these imposed systems that come in. And you'd think I'd support it, but I can't. I mean, there's gendered violence, there's racism. I can't support this in any capacity. And it's anti-science, it's anti-reason logic, it's American politics. They're funding a lot of this, and people don't understand the gravity of that. Despite Jason Kenney doing a whole report on outside funding for Indigenous people, and yet there was nothing that came from that. And here we have this going on. So anyway, these are the things I'm seeing that I think are just ridiculous. I'm proud that this podcast has given solutions and included cultural safety training, cultural first aid to create a safer space for Indigenous people of color, those with disabilities, and LGBTQ2+ to speak. Thank you to authors Cheryl Ward, Chelsea Branch, and Alicia Fridkin of hereToHelp.bc.ca. But what is Indigenous cultural safety and why I should care about it? Their work, along with the cultural action tools I've said 100 times in my podcast, please support Indigenous work like this as part of your reconciliation work and settler understandings. I'm just lucky enough to repeat and highlight them here. Internalized racism and lateral violence is another form of violence Indigenous and marginalized folks experienced by the structure of racism imposed on these lands. RacialEquityTools.org has oodles of resources on so many things, including what is internalized racism. Donna Bevins is the author of that. Do's and Don'ts for Bystander Intervention by American Friends Service Committee. I don't know where family came from there. So that's afsc.org. They have a whole do's and don'ts for bystander intervention. If you see or experience racism, report it to acttoendracism.ca or text at 587-507-3838. I have to do that with the SQUA thing that I've been seeing. Indigenous have been talking about the issue, sharing our reports, or sharing our traumas in reports, commissions, and public hearings, just so it can be regularly disregarded. No more. Honor our words, honor the treaties, listen to politicians and their policies and platforms. If they don't recognize the marginalized in their budget with Gender Equity Plus, if they're cutting violence prevention programs and services, Indigenous education, uterus health choices, gay-straight alliances, lack of human rights for migrants, immigrants, folks with disabilities, know that your vote to that party directly negatively impacts marginalized people. Demand that they implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, the recommendations of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the multiple reports about child welfare reform and violence prevention, and now 231 calls to justice from the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit. Denying those reports is a form of abuse called gaslighting. Our people are experiencing extreme racism in the educational, health, and legal systems, with multiple reports that say the same thing. Demand change from the election platforms and politicians. They don't understand colonialism, racism, privilege, sexism. They have zero business running. It should be understood by all parties, local politicians, community organizations, sports clubs, etc. A great article that I have shared is Truth Before Truth, How Non-Indigenous Canadians Become Allies. And quite frankly, if you were to Google that, there's so many new articles as well. If you're experiencing emotional distress after hearing anything we talked about today and want to talk, call the First Nation and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline at 1-855-242-3310. It is toll free, open, it's bigger than this. We had more bodies, 54 that came out, and Canadians don't understand how much it hurts, but how little press that gets. Because they don't care. They never have. Anyway, hopeforwellness.ca has a text option as well. Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, Two-Spirit. There's, again, 24/7 crisis call line. That's national, and it's toll-free at 844-413-6649. For non-Indigenous, there are oodles of resources for you in the distress center lines, usually a functioning 211. But if those aren't working for whatever reason, 833-456-4566. 60 Scoop Indigenous Society of Alberta is another resource for folks, ssisa.ca. If you see or experience racism, report it at Act to End Racism or text at 587-507-3838. Obviously, my listeners are not listening because I shared that squad video or a picture, And I have to do that work because despite me telling you, when you see or experience racism and you're told to report it, you don't. So thanks for nothing. I'll get that done. But you need to do that work. You need to show up and start doing it. So you can sit at your computers and be horrified when you see a swastika or a white pride sticker. But if you're not reporting it, then you're pearl clutching for nothing. And that's what pearl clutching is. It's being shocked and horrified and doing fuck all about it. And I know a lot of you are doing that. So if you're listening to this, start acting. So it's act to end racism. Show up to these events, volunteer, endorse, donate. Whether it's my two-spirit houseless friend, whether it's my friend struggling with mental illness, whether it's Marilyn North Pagan, whether it's Bear Clan, whether it's Inclusive Canada. Like, there's not a lack of places for you to distribute your wealth. And if the convoy can fundraise $10 million, and we can barely survive our rent, there's a pretty big problem in our society. Anyway, Trans Lifeline, 877-330-6366. I'm just going to say this: if you're trans, LGBTQ2+, please know you are valued, you matter. I'm watching a lot of you struggle on social media, and I'm feeling like an auntie that wishes I could have put more infrastructure in place for you sooner. You know, I seen working at a registry, the lack of services that are available for you and the amount you're expected to pay for your name, your gender, changing birth certificates, etc. That's not including the Indigenous who want to use our names. And conveniently, none of these registries can do that. I watched immigrants from other countries not have enough space to be able to put their full names. It's ridiculous. But again, Canadians are like supporting truck convoys with their money and their hate. The Trevor Project for LGBTQ plus youth, 866-844-7386. LGBTQ2 plus youth line peer support, 1-800 268-9688. Sorry, I thought that was Kids Help Phone, but it's not. Kids Help Phone, 1-800-668-6868. Anyway, lifevoice.ca has lots of crisis supports, especially for LGBTQ2+ and your youth. I hope you know how much you matter to us and that I see you. And as your auntie, I wish I could do more. And I wish more of your aunties, uncles, and grandparents would do fucking more to help you. And violence is my everyday reality. Every Indigenous generation has faced it. That's why I started this podcast. To speak freely without interruption, tone police, leadership shaming, gaslighting questions. Many people don't want to hear Indigenous opinion, but sure want to share theirs. And quite frankly, with this convoy, I'm seeing all sorts of white males get their voices amplified. I'm seeing white allies and progressives, and I use that loosely with quotes, them taking our voices, not encouraging people to donate to us, despite the fact that, you know, Taylor McNally from Inclusive Canada literally has a legal battle she needs funds for, because she was fighting to show how racist the Calgary cop Alex Dunn was to a Black person. And that's not even including all of the Indigenous people who have been shot and killed by the cops here. And now we have a new Black man. I don't know what to say, folks, but 10 million to a racist convoy you can come up with right away. Yeah, I don't know where to even go from here. Internal and external racism is an everyday reality for us. And that's why I needed this podcast, as a boundary to be heard. want to say thank you to my ancestors, my strength, my granny, my mom, and what strength looks like through your example. Thank my dad for teaching me to be blunt and strong. My stepmom for showing me what a proud culture is through her Austrian family and roots, and showing me to be a proud Calgarian. Through her, I'm a second generation proud Calgarian, but I encourage folks who are non-native to not use the terminology native Calgarian. I actually named my podcast this to take it back and make a joke out of it. Um, Thank you to my husband Darcy for producing and editing this show. On top of being my husband, he's been my childhood friend, father of our child, and my support down this journey of the Red Road, witnessing decades of racism, sexism, and oppression. Our child, who we are blessed to learn from daily. We are honored you chose us. You give me daily accountability to be a better and stronger person. My hope is my daughter, my family will be proud in the future of us trying to discuss these present day issues. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can go pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for showing your support. If you value listening or watching, can afford to give, thank you. To those who cannot afford to give, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or your questions. I also have a YouTube channel where you can go and subscribe. Go to Native Calgarian for the latest podcasts and pin posts on social media. And I want to end by giving side eye to those Calgary rabbits. You're lucky I'm not tradish. And my beautiful cousin responded, for you'd be in my dish. Thanks for listening.